بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله والصلاة على رسول الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين وفقنا توفيق الصالحين. اللهم علمنا بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا. Ya Allah, protect us from the evil of ourselves. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. أصلح لنا شأنه كله. لا إله إلا أنت استغفرك وأتوب إليك. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. Intention of the student of knowledge by Imam al-Haddad. نويت التعلم والتعليم والنفع انتفاع والتذكر التذكير والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم ودعاء على الهدى ذات الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وما نوينا شيوخنا من صالح النيات والأعمال. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, alhamdulillah, we're restarting after Ramadan. SubhanAllah. Alhamdulillah. Such a blessed month. SubhanAllah. MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. It's just amazing how Allah Ta'ala makes, it's just a sign that if one does something for the sake of Allah, there's so many things that one would have never thought would be easy, they become easy. SubhanAllah. For example, for those who struggle with the tahajjud, one can get like 3-4 hours of sleep, and then one's up doing suhoor and sahur, right? The food is called sahur, and suhoor is the time. When one eats, one's able to, right? If you're like me, if you have some green tea at with your suhoor, then you're up for a little bit, and it's just really amazing, subhanAllah. Allah just really facilitates ease. So it's just, and we have to remember that, okay, the month's not there, but we have the same Lord. And there's people who all year long, it's like Ramadan for them, subhanAllah. That's in terms of the barakah that they get. It's as if it's Ramadan. It's not. And Ramadan is the greatest month, but it's the master month. But for them, the barakah and the tawfiq they have is... it's like in Ramadan, subhanAllah. And I'm sure for them it's probably even then greater in Ramadan. So, okay, so let's start with wiping over wounds and bandages. So I've taken a lot of this from Mukhtasar Khalil, the fatwa book, because typically in the basic text this is not studied. So there might be a little bit more detail. But the reason I actually included this section is, because people have falls, people have, things happen. There's a lot more surgeries now, it seems like. And me teaching the youth, they have, there's youth that come to class, off and on with, one broke their leg, one broke a bone, fractures this and that. And so... haven't gotten the question enough about what to do in terms of wudu. I thought I'd include this. I haven't included absolutely everything, but it's probably most of what's in Mukhtasar Khalil. Although in Mukhtasar Khalil, it's a very short section. It's actually the actual matan, but matan literally means backbone in Arabic, but matan they use, in the text they use to mean the actual basic text. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's actually 7 lines in Mukhtasar Khalil, which is the fatwa book of the Maliki madhab. It's going to have the mashhur, it's going to have the dominant opinion generally of the Maliki school. And in places where, he says where there was more than one dominant opinion, he gives that as well. So it's, even though it's 7 lines, but like, Sheikh Sadiq says, it's not like other books. And I obviously haven't read all the books, but in the few books that my teachers have taught me, I've learned that it's this book, the Mukhtasar Khalil, it's very dense. And each line has so much meaning. It's really amazing. And so I tried to simplify it and just, hopefully it's not too much information, but this is all we're going to do today. That's partly the reason for that. Okay. So the first part is, and I'm not sure if some of this is being blocked by if this is being blocked by I can do this. Maybe that's better. Okay, there. If there's concern, and concern, quote unquote, means it's similar to the concern one has. So, for example, they say, when would you go from wudu to tayammum? So in the tayammum section, which we did last time, which is lesson 6, we talk about the details of when you would go from, you could go from wudu to tayammum. For example, somebody's fear of their illness getting worse or delaying healing of the illness, and so he lists the conditions when you would go to tayammum. It's the same conditions for when you would go from washing a limb. It's either wudu or ghusl, so it depends on what you need. And that's why in these sections I said, I say wudu, or sometimes I put ghusl, sometimes I don't, but that's what's understood. So if you're somebody who needs wudu, this would apply to you. The wudu would apply to you. And if not, then just apply it to your ghusl. So it would be the same thing. So if it says most of the body is healthy, for example, if you're doing wudu, then most of the body is your limbs of wudu. If you're doing ghusl, then it's your entire body. So just, it's applicable to both wudu and ghusl, even if I haven't mentioned that, but that is mentioned in the book. So if there's concern, again, you're concerned that you have a wound and the healing will be delayed, it will become worse. Somebody who's a reliable doctor, you trust them. They know the rules of they should be familiar with the rules of fiqh. Otherwise, if they're not, then don't, you wouldn't ask them, okay, can I wash this for my prayer or things? And you would just take the information they give you, and then you have to use your best judgment based on knowledge, right? Judgment has to be based on knowledge. So if there's concern, again, go back to the section of tayammum for what concern means about washing a wound during wudu or ghusl. The wound is wet wiped. So what does wet wipe mean? So it doesn't mean a dry wipe. Here, when you're wiping over wounds, in general, anytime we say wiping over wounds, we're talking about a wet wipe. So you know how in wudu how you do mas over your head or your ears? It's a wet wipe. It's not a dry hand wipe. So you take water, just take a little bit of water, let it go, right? But your hands are still wet. The inside of your hands are still wet. That's what is meant here when we talk about wiping over wounds. So that's one thing. The wound is wet wiped, right? So it has to be a valid concern. And again, I have to remind myself and other people of getting waswasa here. And my shuyukh have told me, just be careful about waswasa, because shaitan has different inroads. So, if he'll get to people in different ways in some of the the books of behavior and of controlling, watching one's thoughts and stuff. They talk about the different plots of shaitan. So he'll try, if he can't get somebody to leave things, he'll get them to like do it excessively, and to just constantly worry about it. That's why the person has to, if they're getting waswasa, so if they're getting baseless thoughts, as one of my teachers puts it, there's no basis for the thought, and they're getting it every day in that particular aspect of, in that particular subject. For example, in tahara, they're getting it every day. Even if it's once, then their ruling is separate. They have to leave that baseless thought. So they don't build on their doubt. Then they have to leave those thoughts. If there's concern, so valid concern, you're not somebody who gets waswasa about washing a wound during wudu or ghusl. The wound is wet wiped, right? Just as the head is wiped in wudu. Now, what happens if the wiping of the wound is harmful? Again, harmful, we said, go back to the yammam. So maybe I can go back to it just really quick. We can review that. What does harmful mean? Trying to find the maybe I didn't make a separate slide for it, but inshallah I will if anybody sees it. I don't see the slide. Okay, here it is. One fears an illness, right? So this is a valid fear. Fears delaying of healing time, right? Or fears worsening of an illness. So this would apply to the wiping over the wound also. This last bullet point. So one fears, it has to be a general. I mean, fearing an illness wouldn't really be applicable to the wound, but if you fear harm to you already have a wound, right? And you fear it's the delaying of the healing time, or fear worsening of an illness. Sorry about that. Then you could then that's what they're talking about, harm, in the section of wiping a wound. So the fearing of the illness, again, wouldn't really apply because you already have a wound, right? Okay, so going back to the wiping. Okay. So if wiping of the wound is harmful, right? And so you fear delaying of the healing, or it's just good. It's going to actually get worse, then one would wipe the medicine. Right, so you can't touch the wound itself. It's going to get infected. You're going to, you're going to open the wound. You can't even touch it. It's so sensitive. Then you wipe over the medicine. That's the next step. So these steps you have to take. So wiping directly over the wound is harmful. Then you wipe over the medicine. Right, they put some thick medicine over it. Maybe it's dry. You can actually, it's always a wet wipe, remember that. If not the medicine, right, they're like, you can't add any wetness to the medicine, and you were told, and you feel the doctor is reliable, and there's actually fear. Sometimes it's uncanny fear, and it's baseless, and you don't give it any consideration, but, because your hand's just slightly wet. So can you not even pat it? right? That would be the wipe. You can't even pat it, like just pat, pat, pat the wound. Even that's not allowed. If not the medicine, then the bandage, right? So you put a Band-Aid or something over it, or a cast. Somebody broke their, la qadar Allah, they had a fracture. That's the order of the wiping, right? So the basis is washing the area, right, in wudu. If not, then wet wiping the wound, right? If that's going to delay the healing or make it worse, then you would wipe the medicine. If not, then the bandage or the cast. It's all a wet wipe. And being in a state of ritual purity is not a condition for wiping over the wound. Somebody broke their leg, la qadar Allah. They weren't in wudu, or they broke their wudu because they fell. Now they're like, and then they just rush to the hospital, la qadar Allah, la qadar Allah. And they're not going to go do wudu, right? It's on their arm. So, I mean, they could maybe and just, I mean, I don't, but sometimes just moving the limb, Allahu alam, that might be excruciatingly painful and it might harm their limb. But in any case, for whatever reason, they're not in wudu and they put the cast. So that's fine. It's totally fine. The wound or the bandage or the medicine or the bandage, it's like that limb. So just consider it like that. So that's what you're wet wiping, and we'll talk about when you wet wipe and when you would do a partial, when do you go to tayammum. So just a note that when you're doing a wet wipe and say you have the bandage wrapped around and they're like, well, don't get the bandage oh no, this is about wrapping too much. So this is, it's very difficult to actually get just the wound area with the bandage, right? Inevitably, you're going to cover areas around the wound that don't have a wound. So you just want to use caution in that. You're going to have a little bit extra area that doesn't have the wound that's going to be covered. So it's difficult to bandage only with the wound and nothing more. And so there's a principle here that I mentioned, ad-darura tuqadru biqadriha. This is mentioned. Necessity is given consideration in accordance with that necessity. Meaning, so there's some, there's a need for some of the area outside the wound to be covered, because it's impossible. You're going to get water into the wound, if you only cover the wound, and it's very, very difficult. So just do a little bit extra if you need to, and just be, it's excused to the extent of the need. So whatever you need, just use that and just be careful. And you have to be careful with for somebody who's going to the hospital, or like, you just have to tell them, just please only bandage what you need to do, and what is not needed to bandage, please don't do that. And sometimes you just have to be your own advocate, and that's really important, because they'll do what they think is important to them, and a lot of times it's just extra. I spent a lot of time in different hospitals with people, so a lot of it is just over precaution and over caution. It's not necessary. And so, if it's not necessary, it's not going to be excused. So you just have to be your own advocate. And part of being an advocate is just knowing the rules. So, or you may not use this, but you might be somebody who's stuck in that situation and they don't know. And if our wudu is not valid, right? So if the bandage is huge and there's an area that is not washed, and it's not excused, right? Then that means the prayer is not valid. And one of my shuyukh was very strong in his fiqh, and he just really tells people to focus on the priorities. And of course, fasting is a pillar. Ramadan is a pillar. It's the third pillar. But he just brought up this point. He said, people are making mistakes in their wudu and their prayer. And prayer is, even though it's a kabira to leave Ramadan fast, it's a major sin to intentionally leave Ramadan fast. But prayer is actually higher. It's worse to leave the prayers, because even within the major sins, some are greater than others. So that's why he's just always, he just reminds people, learn your wudu, learn your ghusl, learn what breaks your prayer. And just, over the last 20 years and just having taught, alhamdulillah, being blessed to taught and being blessed to teach and, what my teachers have taught me, I just really realize how many people are making mistakes, basic mistakes in their wudu and ghusl. So it does need to be reviewed regularly. This is something that, and I've reviewed it, even if I've reviewed it regularly, it just never seems regular enough. And it seems like I'm always looking up stuff, and I probably always will until I go. Allah give us husnul khatimah. Okay, so wiping over wounds is the second part. What are the conditions for permissibility of wiping? Which means if you don't fulfill these conditions, you would be doing wudu, right? So majority of the body is healthy. Again, what does majority of the body mean? If a person needs to do wudu, then you consider just the limbs of wudu. Are most of the limbs of wudu, do they not have the wound? So let's just take the wound, for example, because that's what's, it's easy to maybe explain it that way. Say there's a wound, but it's only on a small portion of all the area that you need to wash for wudu, right? So majority of the limbs of wudu are healthy. There's no wound on them, right? Or for ghusl, you would consider your whole body. Is majority of my body healthy? But maybe I have two arms, la qadar Allah, that la qadar Allah, their arms were broken or there's a cast, right? So for wudu, that's majority of the body is not healthy, but for ghusl, that's still majority of the body is healthy, right? So do you see the difference? So majority of the body means more than half. Okay, so one condition for doing a wet wipe over the wound, right, is majority of the body is healthy. Second is maybe less than half the body is healthy, but washing what is healthy would not be harmful. So sometimes a person could have say half the body, say like a'udhu billah, they were in a fire or something, and there's a lot of they have a lot of what's that called, burns. And washing what is healthy, it would harm the wound, right? So then you would go to then we'll talk about it. Then we're gonna talk about it, right? So wiping over the wound is in the condition that majority of the body is healthy, right? Or less than half the body is healthy, but you can actually wash the healthy body and it's not harmful to the wound, right? But if they're like, well, you can't even wash the healthy area, it's going to affect the wound, or somebody's so, I guess there's situations when maybe something would happen to them, Allahu alam, would they get a fever, if the body is so traumatized, if they put water on there, if they have to do ghusl, and the majority of the body is has burn marks, right? So, that would be a situation that, one would need to discuss that, right? So if these conditions are fulfilled, then you're somebody who is doing a wet wipe. Okay. So now you are doing a wet wipe. How do you do it? So if most of the body is healthy, again, this is repeat from last slide, or less than the body is healthy, and washing the healthy is not harmful to the wound, right? So if you're in this category, then you must wet wipe the wound and wash the rest. Wash the rest. So this is like if you're doing wudu, you're just doing a regular wudu, except for the area that's wounded. You just wet wipe it, right? Like you would do your head, even when it's not wounded. How do you do your head? in wudu, you just do a wet wipe, right? Now, if most of the body is not healthy, or washing what is healthy is harmful to the wound, right? So we talked about that. One does tayammum alone. So you do tayammum, but if one performs wudu or ghusl, so you went back to the original, you're like, well, I don't really care. I'm just gonna, it's gonna delay my healing, but I'm just gonna go back, going to do regular wudu anyway, and I'll just deal with the regular, with the delay in the healing. So it suffices because you went back to the original. That's the asl, right? That's the basis. The default is that one does a complete wudu or the complete ghusl, and you went back to that, even though you were somebody who has the excuse of doing the wet wipe on the wound. Also, if only a small portion is healthy, so here it's a very small portion, like a hand on her foot is healthy. So this is somebody who has wounds. They were in a car accident. They got burns. Allah protect us. So one would do tayammum alone. But again, if somebody goes back to the default, which is a wudu, which is doing wudu or ghusl, it suffices. Somebody might be, they might be in a situation where they actually have to, you would have to consult on this, but this is the basics, right? And then you would have to consult if you have a specific situation. Okay, now back here, if you're able to touch the wound, this is your situation, correct? What if they say you don't even touch the wound, or it's excruciatingly painful to even touch the wound, right? If one is unable to wipe even over the bandage, right? Because we said when you do a wet wipe, you have to either do it directly on the wound. If you can't do that, because it's going to delay the healing, it's going to make the wound worse, it's going to start bleeding again. So then we said, right, you do a wet wipe over the medicine. They said, you can't touch the medicine because it's going to affect the wound. Then you do it over the bandage, right? Then they say you can't even, and this is you can trust the doctor when he says don't touch the bandage because it's going to delay the healing. And you've thought about it and you really feel that that's a valid concern. And they say don't touch the bandage. Usually on casts and stuff, you can do a wet wipe because they're so thick. I've seen those that you can't. You can touch the wound. Okay, but you feel it's a valid concern that you can't touch the wound. Okay, now, so it's a whole different scenario in this case. So if you are unable to wipe over the bandage and the wound is on one of the limbs of tayammum, right? So there's two situations. One, you can't wipe the wound, right? You can't touch it at all. Right? And it's on the hands or the face. Right? It's on the hands or the face. Hands on the face you do in tayammum, right? And you also wash them if you're a person of wudu, correct? So whether you do wudu in this situation or you do tayammum in this situation, it's going to be deficient, correct? Because they say don't touch your face that has, or your arm that has this wound. This area, or just this wound that you have on the arm, you cannot touch it. So whether you do a ghusl, whether you do wudu or you do tayammum, it's going to be deficient. So in this case, you have to do a deficient wudu because wudu is the asl, is the basis. So you wouldn't do tayammum, right? So it's on the hands or the face, right? Because those are two limbs of tayammum. So your tayammum in this case is going to be deficient. So you need to do a deficient wudu. Right? Now, what if the wound is not on the limbs of tayammum, right? The limbs of tayammum, we said, are hands and the face, right? So it's not on the limbs of tayammum. So it's on your foot. You don't wipe your foot in tayammum. So, but it's on one of your limbs of wudu, or maybe you need to do ghusl. Then it's any of your limbs, right? So, actually, in that case, well, I mean it. here would be relevant to wudu. So it's an issue of either doing a complete tayammum or a deficient wudu. So here we're talking about wudu. So it's on your foot. And you're like, well, I could do a complete tayammum with my face and my hands, right? Because if I do wudu, it means I can't touch the wound. So there's an area that's going to be of my foot that not only does it not get washed, it doesn't even get wet wiped. So it's definitely a deficient wudu. So what do I do? Which is better? Do I do a complete tayammum or do I do a deficient wudu? Right? So see the next slide. This is Khalil, so there's a lot of detail. But inshallah, it won't be confusing. Okay, so again, the wound is on a limb of tayammum. This is just repeat. So you perform a deficient wudu, right? This is clear. Because deficient wudu is higher than doing a deficient tayammum, right? So in this case, it's either deficient wudu and deficient tayammum. You do deficient wudu. Now, in the second situation, right? If the wound is not on the limbs of tayammum, so it's on the foot, for example, like we said. So what do? You can do a deficient wudu, right? Right? You have a choice. All these four are dominant opinions, but the fourth one is most precautionary. You wash the areas that are healthy, and then the wound actually you have to leave, because we said you're in the category where you're unable to touch the wound. So you wash what is healthy, and then do a deficient wudu, and then you have to leave the wound because you're pretty sure, reasonably sure that you really can't touch the wound. Or you could do a complete tayammum. Right, so you do, for example, you have it on your foot, and so on your foot, it's going to be a complete tayammum, and it's going to be a deficient wudu, correct? I'm going to check this third point, if the wounded area is more than the healthy area. I need to check the one. And then the fourth option is you combine a tayammum and wudu, because your wudu is deficient. So you wash what's healthy, right? You combine tayammum. So you would do both. And that's the most precautionary. 269. So 1 second. So he says, ثالثها tayammum. So he says the third one is tayammum in kathura. So you do tayammum in the case where you have a lot of what's wounded is more than what is healthy. Then you do tayammum. Otherwise, you would do wudu. You would just do a deficient wudu. Is that clear? And then 4, that's the third one. And 4 is that you combine tayammum and wudu. So any questions? We're almost to the last section, the last slide. So in the fourth situation where you're combining tayammum and wudu, you would wash what's healthy. And then you would do a tayammum, like a dry wipe. Remember, because we said you can't, so this is again the situation where you can't touch the wound. You do a dry wipe of what's of what's not healthy. Because they said you can't do a wet wipe. If you can't wipe over the bandage, I suppose you can use. Hang on a second. If you can't wipe over the bandage, I suppose you can use a plastic wrap over it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you can do that, where you can put a plastic wrap over it, then you would do a wet wipe, yeah. But if somebody doesn't, sometimes they don't have a bandage, they need to leave it open. Like we just had a situation where somebody, they had hijama done and they weren't well, and it causes, sometimes in hijama, if somebody's recovering from an illness or they've had allergies, they get these like water warts after the hijama, and some of them opened up. So they were actually told to leave them completely dry. It's not in an area of wudu, so it's not an issue. But if they needed to make ghusl, that would, it's better for them not to even bandage it, because to get as much air to it so that it heals properly. So then you wouldn't put anything over it. I mean, you could. I guess what you could do in that situation is put something over it, like a bandage over it temporarily, and just do a wet wipe. If it was like on an arm or something, if somebody needed to be ghusl, they could put a bandage or like a plastic something over it and then wash. But it's just very difficult in that area to actually not get water on it. Unless they're like, it's okay, it's such a minor thing if it gets wet a little bit, and I'll just pat it dry right after, and it might delay the healing. So in that, it just depends. But yes, if you can put plastic over it, then you would wet wipe it. Maybe if it's like a burn, like they want to leave it open and they don't want any water touching it, or it's just very painful. So if it's extremely painful, I haven't asked about that, but that would be my assumption, Allahu Alam, that would have the same ruling if somebody had just severe burns. Because I'm assuming if it's that painful, Allahu Alam, that it would actually delay the healing. I don't know, but... Okay, now what happens if it falls off, right? And you're in prayer. If the bandage falls off, if one removes the bandage or it fell off, so the bandage is it's like your protection, right? It's like that wall. So if one removes the bandage or it fell off or the medicine came off, and this occurred during the prayer, so now you have an exposed area that is not ritually pure. So you have to cut off the prayer, or well, it's invalid, right? And you repeat the wiping, and then you have to start the prayer over from the beginning, because it's an invalid prayer. Anytime the prayer is invalid, you can't build on it. You have to start from the beginning. If the bandage fell off, the wound has healed, and one is still in wudu, one washes the area or wet wipes it, if it is the head or the ears, right? Because the head or the ears, you wet wipe. So if it's healed, it's not excused now, so you would have to go back to the regular wudu. And if it's not healed, then you will go back to this first point. Inshallah, this is clear. So I'm going to do a shorter session. 40 minutes is good. جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ما هو أهله جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ما هو أهله جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ما هو أهله جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ما هو أهله سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام والسلام. Ya Allah, give us tawfiq to implement what we're learning and make us a means for khair in this ummah, and give everybody else tawfiq as well to study the basics and to practice the basics until we meet you. You know, I was just thinking about, I had this session recently. They asked me to give a talk somewhere in Ramadan, and so I actually did a talk on basically what are the priorities when seeking knowledge, and I went back to hadith. I took to hadith, one, the hadith of Sayyidina Jibreel, and how the ulama take from that, you know, the different subjects of the sacred sciences. And that hadith, the Prophet Sayyidina Jibreel came towards the end of the Prophet ﷺ's life, and he asked him questions. There's so much beautiful adab in that hadith, and there's so many lessons to be learned. And it basically lays out the plan for what to seek in terms of the fard ayn. And then the other hadith I used is in Imam Nawawi's collection of 40 hadith, and it starts off with the one who harms a friend of mine, verily I declare war on them. And it's interesting, in the second part of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ then mentions, and it's a hadith Qudsi, so it's in the first person. The Prophet ﷺ, but it's in the Prophet ﷺ's words, that was the dominant opinion, that even if the hadith Qudsi, it's Allah Ta'ala speaking first person, but the Prophet ﷺ, it's the Prophet ﷺ's words. So then the description is given of who is that special friend, because everybody's a friend of Allah, because every Muslim is a friend of Allah, right? Because Allah Ta'ala it's mentioned in the Quran that all the believers, Allah is their Mawla, He's their master. And so, but in this hadith is talking about those special friends of Allah, right? The wilaya khasa. So how do you get this? And it talks about, you know, the first step to it and to attaining Allah's love is to do the fard. And then when the slave continues to draw close to Allah with the nawafil, with the extra acts. And so a lot of times, and Allah bless my teacher who keeps bringing this up, and he's become really unpopular for it, because he just keeps, and he's actually quite upset about it. Because he says people are doing all this nawafil, but they're doing all this haram, and then they're doing it in Ramadan, and they're doing it in the masajid, and masajid are sacred places, and Ramadan is a very sacred month, and people are leaving all this fard, first of all, and they're doing all this nafil. So here's the hadith. Truly Allah, and this is narrated by Sayyidina Abu Huraira, and it's a hadith in Bukhari. So truly Allah, may He be exalted, has said, whosoever acts with enmity towards a friend of mine, against him will I indeed declare war. Like, we want the help of Allah, and you know, sometimes we feel helpless, right? So you want Allah's protection, right? This is what we need to do. So how do we get that? How to become that friend that's mentioned in the first part of this hadith? Nothing endears my servant. Right? Ma taqarraba ilay abdi bi shay'in ahabba. This is hub, like love. Nothing endears my servant to me than doing what I have made obligatory upon him. And so by default, right, that would also be, this is my addition here, by default that would be also leaving the haram. Like, it's far to leave the haram. Right, so going back to the hadith, and my servant ceases not seeking my nearness by offering supererogatory, i.e. nawafil prayers, till I love him. So the first step is doing the fard and leaving the haram, and then doing the nawafil. So a lot of times people are doing the nawafil, and they don't have to do all of that. But it's just so hard on the nafs to actually leave the haram. It's so difficult to leave the haram, like not to have, just basic things like, and some things are so easy, just like, people getting decked out and putting up their pictures of Eid on Facebook and all that, and the sisters getting decked out. Just all of that is, and all types of men are looking at that. These new tribulations, I mean, this is just like these last 50 years, right? I mean, I don't even know how old is all this social media. It's not even, 20 years? 20 maybe. So all the new ways of doing haram, and I'm just so surprised that so many practicing people are doing that, just wearing really bright clothes, and just the whole body is showing. I was just really shocked, and it's just really depressing to see that. But you don't have to do all this nafil. Don't do all this nafil. But it's part of breaking the nafs. It's part of patience. A lot of times people will talk about patience. But a huge, huge aspect of doing the fard and leaving the haram is being patient with it. Right? And there's ayahs, I don't have them in front of me, and it's not permissible for me to quote Quran in meaning in Arabic. But Allah Ta'ala, I think it's in Surah Taha is one of the places I remember, is that Allah Ta'ala tells His beloved to be patient with the prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ's prayer was so beautiful. Sayyidah Aisha talks about how beautiful his prayer was. And Allah Ta'ala says to be patient with it. And so it takes a lot of patience and a lot of restraint to just say, I'm not going to do that. People are putting their pictures on Facebook. I'm not going to do that. It totally shows my shape, and they do all these close-ups of women, it's like right there where you can see their shape, you can see their beauty. All kinds of men are looking at that. It's all not permissible. And one of the things and the other thing is, say, just from a very selfish perspective, somebody puts up a picture of their children, or they're newly married and they have wedding pictures, and it's very selfish because somebody else could be wanting to get married or want to have children, and that's actually creating a difficulty for them. And so we become such an egoistic community for the most part, that we just don't think of the impact that it has on other people. It's causing grief in other people. Oh, I'll put my picture of my daughter, or my children, or somebody just got married, or whoever, and there might be somebody who they want a spouse. One of my teachers said, I'm doing prohibition of the tongue, so I bring these examples up. He said there was a woman who actually put up a picture of her cute daughter on one of these social mediums, and it had, I don't know, several million hits. Oh, how cute she is, blah, blah. And he said she got cancer. And he said that's probably the evil eye. So the evil eye, and, inshallah, we talked about it in the prohibition of tongue class, how it was explained to me, and the evil eye is true. It's mentioned in the sound hadith. And how it was explained to me, and the people who actually had this disease, they talk about it. They talk about how it's like they feel this heat, a'udhu billah, leaving this eye. So Allah reward them for their honesty. And traditionally, in traditional communities, certain people are known for the evil eye, and they were, there's all these rules related to that. Like the qadi could if that person was known for that, and people, said this person is known in our community that if he looks at things, or she, that, people die, things break, then the qadi could put that person in house arrest. It's mentioned in the commentary of Maharim al-Lisan, prohibition of the tongue. And so this woman, and so they say that people feel jealous in their heart, and then they don't do anything, to work on that jealousy. And according to this person, these people who mention that it's like a heat that leaves the eye, it harms other people. And the Prophet ﷺ, the Sadiq al-Masduq, right? It's hard for people to believe this, but I believe it, because the Prophet ﷺ said it. And she got cancer. So, he was saying it's probably the evil eye. And I totally believe that. Allah, Allahu alam, like it's a matter of the unseen if it's actually the evil eye, but it's probably Allahu alam. But these are the things that a lot of people, so many people are leaving the fard. And with these pictures on Facebook, and it's horrific. So Allah just, with the fard and leaving the wajib. And people don't want to do nawafil, they don't want to do extra acts, you can't make them. But just to be patient, be patient with and restrain yourself, and just, we have to make a lot of dua. I know there's a lot of temptations now that we didn't have 20 years ago, so it's a huge it's a time of a lot of tribulation. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the tribulations would come one after the other, and they're darker. One is darker than the other, if I remember the hadith correctly. And so it's all the more reason not to be alone and to be with people of, righteous people, to go to places where they're having gatherings, righteous gatherings, just to start your own, just have one person. And alhamdulillah, Allah's given me tawfiq to, that's what I've, tried to do as much as I can, is just whether I was studying with somebody or when I was able to teach, to do classes, so then I'm reviewing for classes, so it's just like when you have your commitment with somebody else, it makes a huge difference, because somebody else is dependent on you, right, in some way. And so it helps a lot. So making commitments with other people and saying, just please help me, and sticking to this. And realize when your moments are, when you're going to get to, when you're going to do this kind of stuff, and say, okay, well, I'm doing these things. It just means I need to keep myself more busy. One of the things one of my teachers mentioned when he was teaching Prohibitions of Tongue, he said the nafs, the ego is such that if you don't busy it with good, it'll busy you with bad. So people have too much time on their hands. And then people say, oh, I have all this tribulation. Well, maybe Allah Ta'ala sent you that tribulation because you were doing all this haram, or you were going to fall into haram. So now you're just, you're crying to Him, or somebody got sick in your family, so now you're busy taking care of them, and it's keeping you out of haram. It's just, people have to reflect on this. And again, this whole life is about patience. And sometimes and in the hadith on the end of time, I remember Sheikh Samir, one of the leading Hanafi fiqh scholars in Syria, and probably the whole world, Allahu alam, but he mentioned that in one of the hadith in the end of time, the Prophet ﷺ talked about the fitna of sarra, the fitna of ease. And so that's also a test, is having too much time on our hands. And not finding, one has to find stuff to do, to having food at the table, having health. If someone has all of that, then that's like a test for you. Like, what are you going to do with that time? Are you going to put your pictures up on Facebook? Are you going to waste your time? I just, I have one of my teachers, he has his classes on Facebook, and I just really don't, it's just, seeing what other people put up, it's really depressing for me, one. And just, it's a test for me as well, right? So I've been trying to figure out like what to do, but that's where he posts them, and they're not posted on YouTube. So it's just inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, right? You're supposed to say that when any difficulty strikes. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Allahumma ajinni fi musibati wa akhluf li khayran minha, kama qala sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. So Allah give us all help where, but Allah is the same. Allah doesn't change. His attributes don't change. Alhamdulillah, we'll be starting the Aqidah class this Sunday. I'm really looking forward to it. So just we have to busy ourselves with khair. Al-dunya mal'unun wa mal'unun ma fiha illa alimun aw muta'allimun aw ma walaha. Aw kama qala sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Everything, in the dunya is mal'un, it's cursed, meaning it's removed from the mercy of Allah. Except, one of the exception, al-alim wal-muta'allim, right? The alim, the scholar, and muta'allim, the seeker of knowledge. Wa ma walaha, and what's connected to it, right? So somebody who's helping a seeker of knowledge, in whatever way, so somebody who's serving the shuyukh. A lot of people don't want to serve the shuyukh. A lot of times people are just serving their children. It's just easier on the nafs, they're just easier. It's just so much easier. Because our love is mostly for the dunya, so we're serving people where it's not recommended for us to serve because it just makes them spoiled. So, but everything about the dunya is removed from the mercy of Allah, except, right, alim, muta'allim, wa wala. The alim and the scholar, the seeker of knowledge, and what's connected to it. So we have to be in one of these. We need to fall in one of these three for the rest of our lives. And what a way, Allah reward my family for facilitating me being able to teach these classes. So they're inshallah from the mawala. May Allah accept everything from them. SubhanAllah. So we have to, and there's no khair in anything else other than that. And if there was, the Prophet ﷺ would have mentioned it. So, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa sallam. Oh, kama qala sallallahu jazakallah khair. So inshallah, next week we're starting on the prayer. We're going to start on the prayer. So we're going to have 3 more classes, and then we're going to have another break because I'll be traveling for a month, and then we're going to resume. So inshallah, I'm going to do as much of the prayer as I can. Alhamdulillah, a lot of the slides are already made, so we're going to meet again the same time, inshallah, next week. Okay, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika.